Welcome back. Today we'll be talking about the highly debated topic among the Terraria community, corruption versus crimson. At the start of a Terraria world, there are many different options and decisions to make, but one of the first and biggest choices is world evil. This will determine which corrosive biome will cover your world. Warning, this video does contain spoilers for the end of pre-hard mode Terraria. Before we begin, just keep in mind that this video is completely opinion based, and I will not try to tell you why one biome is better than another. That's your job. However, I will explain if one item is significantly better than the other. And lastly, this will only cover pre-hard mode Terraria. If you want to see post-Plantera or hard mode, let me know down in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below which evil do you prefer. And let's get right into it. Number 1. Terrain. Well, let's start with the Crimson. The terrain in the Crimson is identical to that of the forest, aside from the blood-colored ground, which gives the biome its name. If you started a world, you may want to avoid the thorns that cover this area. They'll deal around 7 hearts of damage when touched. However, some basic defense can negate the damage down to 1. If you come across one of these large caves found only in the Crimson, it'd be a good idea to avoid them if you're starting in a new world. While they do contain some goodies, you'll want some better gear before exploring these caverns. And now for the corruption side. As soon as you enter this biome, the first thing you'll notice are the chasms. These large holes are the equivalent to the caves in the Crimson biome, so you'll want to stay away from them for now. This place is much more difficult to cross. It has the same thorns as the Crimson, but in a decayed purple color that matches the place. Number 2. Enemies. You will find a total of 5 different enemies in these biomes. 2 in the Corruption and 3 in the Crimson. In the Corruption, there are Eater of Souls. These annoying flying enemies will try to knock you into the pits that surround their home, and their overall goal is to just make your life miserable. They'll charge at you and have around 60 health. It'll cause you lots of issues, but once you're strong enough, they'll just fall apart like paper. The second enemy is much less common, and once you find them, they won't be that much of a hassle. They're called the Devourer. Think of this guy as a giant worm who ate a mushroom from Super Mario. Now let's get into the Crimson. The first enemy in the Crimson is the Chimera. These guys are basically just Eater of Souls, but don't worry. They're much less dangerous without the chasms for them to knock you into. Secondly, are face monsters. While they look like they came straight out of a horror movie, just think of them as tall zombies and you'll be fine. And lastly, the final enemy is the Blood Crawler. Abundant in the caves you've spent avoiding, they'll occasionally come out into the surface. They're just as reskinned wall creeper, but look out, they can still climb on walls. Number 3. Loot. This is when we can start going into the cave in the Crimson and Corruption. Grab a few bombs and blocks and pull out your weapon. You'll want to look for large hearts or shadow orbs. Once you find one, throw some bombs to break the blocks that you can't break with a pickaxe. Destroy the orb with explosives or a hammer. There are 5 different items you can get. A melee weapon, called the Rotted Fork, for the Crimson side, dealing around 17 damage. It maims enemies and is great for crowd control like the Goblin Army. Next is the ranged weapon, known only as the Undertaker. Don't let its appearance fool you, because this bad boy is hot garbage, absolute dog water, with mediocre speed and mediocre damage. The only thing you can use this thing is to get the arms dealer to move. Next up, there is a magic weapon. It's called the Crimson Rod. Pressing attack will summon a maximum of 2 clouds to deal rain damage to your foes, dealing 12 damage per drop. This item is great in arenas and dealing passive damage to bosses. There's also a chance to get the Panic Necklace, an accessory which allows you to run faster when you take a hit. And lastly, for the Crimson, there's a chance for the Crimson Heart to break and just turn into the item itself. This light pet will bounce around, illuminating areas. For the Corruption side, here's the list of items you can get from Shadow Orbs. Number 1 is a melee weapon called the Ball of Hurt. It's a flail that deals around 20 damage. The second item is a ranger weapon. It's much better than the Undertaker. It's called the Musket. It deals 25 to 30 damage, and it's strong enough to beat Skeletron. Number 3 is a magic weapon. It's called the Vile Form. And it's just bad. Never use this thing. Number 4 is an accessory. It's called the Band of Star Power. It is a magic accessory which increases mana by 20. While it doesn't sound good on its own, it can be combined with other accessories for a much better item. And the 5th one is a Shadow Orb. It's basically the equivalent of the Crimson Heart, except corruption. So now that you know a lot more about the loot, enemies, and terrain of these biomes, let's move on to the last and most important part. Number 4, bosses. Each biome has their own respective boss, and I highly recommend beating them once you are strong. For the Crimson, it's the Brain of Cthulhu. They're weaker against the melee class, but if you're the ranger class, well, good luck. To summon in the Brain of Cthulhu, you're going to need to break 3 Crimson Hearts, or you can craft a Bloody Spine. This amalgam of flesh teleports around you with his minions, the creepers. Nope, not that kind. That kind. They'll charge at you and can easily kill you if you're in a cramped space. Expanding the fighting chambers is highly recommended. Until all the creepers are defeated, the brain itself is invulnerable. Once it opens up, he'll teleport around you with a major speed increase. If you're in expert mode, he'll create fake clones of himself, trying to confuse you. Once defeated, he'll drop Crimtane, tissue samples, and he has a small chance to drop a baby face monster pet. If you're in expert mode, he'll also drop an accessory called the Brain of Confusion, which confuses enemies that hits you and gives you a chance to dodge attacks. For the corruption half of things, the dedicated boss is the Eater of Worlds. The Eater of Worlds is much weaker against the Ranger class and the Summoner class, but considering as the Mage class doesn't have very good weapons against this boss, you're probably going to have much more difficulty with your Mage. Now, to summon him in, it's the same thing as Brain of Cthulhu by crafting the worm food item or destroying 3 shadow worms. This rotten worm is simply put just a ton of eaters of souls just lined up into the shape of a worm. But each segment does have its own health bar, so if you break a middle part, the worm will break into 2 worms. Now, piercing weapons are highly recommended as you can hit all the parts at once. And you should also wear strong armor, and it's a good idea to grapple onto the ceiling, as he probably won't be able to reach you from there. But if you are in expert mode, it will shoot out breakable. I repeat, breakable! High damage dealing vile spitballs. Oh, also, did I mention they're breakable? Once you defeat it, it will drop Demonite, Shadow Scales, and has a small chance to drop a Baby Eater of Souls pet. If you're in expert mode, it'll drop the Worm Scarf, which increases damage reduction by 16%. While this may not seem like a lot, it can be the difference between winning and dying in a boss fight. Well, now that you know a bit more about the 2 evil biomes in Terraria, which one do you prefer? Comment down below. Also, this is the first video I've used a script for, so I'd love to know which video format you prefer. What video would you like to see next? Sky versus ocean? Jungle versus dungeon? Ice versus desert? Well, that's for you to decide. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.